I want to be the person who says we need to move on. The dream is not just everything, but like on the other hand, like EPCOT was something. Like EPCOT was something, guys. And if you didn't see it, you have no idea. Like it was something we don't have anymore, and that really is truly lost in a real way.
That is Ben Lancaster, creator of the audio series Prototype World of Tomorrow and director of The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks for joining me here on episode 119 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. On this show, I talk to smart people about theme parks and related topics, and that's definitely the case this week. I hope you're doing okay out there. Halloween is next Saturday. It's definitely a very different time in terms of Halloween here at this house. We have plenty of candy. The rest of it is kind of in disarray, but I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. Really excited about this show. I talked to Ben Lancaster, who actually was a guest on episode 7 of this show, which was in December 2015. At that time, Ben was working on his movie, The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. And I remember thinking, what an interesting concept. I'd only done 5 interviews at the time, but reached out and he was cool enough to come talk with me when the show was just getting started. And now, almost 5 years later, we have finally returned to talk once again here on the show. His big project right now is the Prototype World of Tomorrow, which is a really cool audio series set in Progress City. I really like TV that focuses on alternate realities or alternate universes. And one of them is The Flash, which I'm currently going through, which has its big Earth 2 or Fringe with its completely alternate world where everything's a bit different. And that's kind of how I think about this show, where what if Progress City had actually happened? What would it be like? And I know it's not really focused on alternate realities in that way, but what I mean is it's kind of like very similar to our world, but is different because, of course, Walt's idea for EPCOT, the city, never happened. And Ben puts together a fun mystery story, a lot of familiar voices that you may know, including some that have been on the show. Really cool audio podcast, has had 2 seasons, definitely worth checking out. So it was fun to talk to him about that and dig a little further into Walt's Frozen Head. And Ben also answered some oddball questions that I had that I think you're going to enjoy hearing how that went. Before I get to this podcast, I recently was a guest on the Notably Disney podcast again with Brett Nachman as the host. And this was a Disney Tunes and Quotes trivia episode. There were 4 of us on there. I teamed up with Tommy T, host of the Diz Quiz podcast. We went up against Tammy Tuckey, of course, is the host of the TR Talk Show podcast, and Aaron Duran, who's also a big Disney fan. And it was quite a battle. A good 90 minutes of trivia. I'll admit, I am not such an expert on a lot of Disney movies. Thankfully, not to give too much away, but Tommy helped out a lot, and I was able to fill in here and there, especially when we had questions about music or quotes from Disney attractions. And beyond this episode, Brett does a great job. He's had some really cool guests. He's had Don Hahn and Richard Bellis, the composer, Bruce Broughton, just a lot of interesting people involved with Disney, the films, the attractions, the music. Brett does a great job. And if you're not listening to that show, you should check out the episode that I'm on, but then also listen to some of his interviews because I think Brett is really hitting it out of the park with some of his guests. So I really enjoyed talking to Ben. It's funny, he's actually someone that I've met in person because he lives in St. Louis. Ben and I and a few others once did a Disney trivia night where I knew nothing, basically, because we went in and all the questions were really specific ones about movies, but Ben knew a lot. It's good to talk to somebody who's from this area, which is pretty rare here at the Tomorrow Society podcast. So let's dive right in. Here is Ben Lancaster. All right, my guest today is the creator, producer, and showrunner of the audio series Prototype World of Tomorrow. He's also the writer and director of the Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head feature film. He first appeared on the Tomorrow Society podcast on episode 7, way back in December of 2015. It is Benjamin Lancaster. Ben, thank you so much for returning to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Dan.
Yeah, it's been a while. A few things have happened in the world,
Just a few.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about all the things you've done, of course. But when we first talked, you were working on your film and hadn't done so much, and now so many things have happened. But I'd love to start with like I mentioned, the Prototype World of Tomorrow. It's a really cool series, and I'd love to know just kind of how this idea sprung up. Like, how did you originally come up with this idea for doing like an audio drama, and what made you want to do it?
I pretty much knew I wanted to do an audio drama after I finished Walt's Frozen Head and realized I didn't have another feature film in me at least at that moment. You put in so much time to get out this 80-minute product, which I'm very proud of, I'm very happy with. But, goes on and lives up on a streaming service somewhere. And then you move on to the next thing. But, unless there was a paycheck involved, I wasn't going to be able to do the process of raising the money and this, that, and the other. But I also looked around and I realized I had this fan base who were interested in a lot of the things I was interested in. And so I figured, well, how do I leverage that and tell stories in a different way? I had done some audio dramas before for Indiana Public Radio and things like that, and really kind of became interested in this idea of audio dramas that we could record live, but also have the people just be in wildly different locations, and so we could find really good talent from all over the country. And just all sort of came together based on those impulses. It obviously, like you, EPCOT is something I'm really fascinated in, especially its kind of early history and early incarnation. And so taking that as an inspiration, it just all kind of fit together. And I don't know why it became a murder mystery, but that was just from day one. It was always a murder mystery. So maybe it's just the film noir aspect of it, where you have the guy talking, the narrator talking to you.
Yeah, and that's really what got to me is when I would, the way that you kind of follow the story, it reminded me of something like The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon or something, where it's like you're getting these little clues and you have this kind of wisecracking, sort of not totally invested lead character, like those things. So how much, you just mentioned it, but how much did those types of stories really influence you when you were creating it?
There's a lot of genres I love, and I like mysteries, but it's not a huge passion. So I had to go and do a lot of research and dive into a lot of those kind of classic hard-boiled detectives. Though this is kind of a subversion of that. I really wanted to know like how they're written, how they're structured, and things like that. So I dove into reading some Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe, and a lot of those books are just absolutely fantastic reads, and I can't recommend them highly enough. But I dove into that, dove into the movie adaptations, and really tried to get at to what the heart of that sort of structure was, and then knowing that in a way that I can completely take a brand new approach, give it those sci-fi elements and give it that comedy element layered on top. But at its heart, I really wanted to create this good mystery. It's not just about the trappings and everything, but I really wanted to create this at this base. It's a mystery and you can solve it at home.
Right. And I think that comes through because, the setting is kind of the draw, but you have to have something that drives it narratively because, it can't just be, wow, Progress City's really cool. Let's sit around and think about that. You have to have kind of an ongoing story. And I think that works really well. But I jumped ahead a bit because it's possible that listeners don't know as much about it. And you already referenced EPCOT and we've referenced Progress City. And I'm sure people are like, wait, what? So I'd love for you to just talk about briefly, just, what's the basic set setup, like if you were describing what it was to somebody, just like a short idea of what the story is or maybe the premise for it.
Sure. Well, as I say in the intro, in the swamps of Central Florida, there is built a city, a self-styled city of the future where 50,000 temporary residents live, work, and occasionally die. So that's the setup that begins every episode. And then we're following our main character, whose name is Tim, and we're following him on his adventures as he tries to become this sort of self-styled private investigator, detective for the city. And you sort of see his successes and his failures and how he winds up stumbling into these what are going to be eventually various adventures. Right now there's 2 seasons up, and each season is kind of a self-contained story, though they are going to sort of all interconnect as we move forward. But that's really the premise behind it. So we're following him, we're following Eve, who becomes his partner, and as they go through their adventures.
Well, excellent. Yeah. And I think it's a lot of fun to kind of go forward and meet these kind of new characters and kind of expand the story. And you mentioned really being interested in just Progress City and EPCOT and all of that. So I'd love to hear a little more too about what interested you about setting, a fictional story inside Progress City, or a version of the Progress City that was going to get created.
Well, it's so fascinating, not only as sort of the prelude for what we know as EPCOT. That's enough on its own, maybe. But the idea of the social experiment that was sort of behind it is really interesting. You get into stuff with the writings of Buckminster Fuller and this kind of movement that happened in the 1960s and, around then. And, I said at one point on Twitter, like, I don't have a name for this genre, but I really have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more of it. This sort of sleek 1960s vision of what the future was going to be, kind of Tomorrowland feel to it. I really do have a feeling like people are looking at these writings and this idea of what the future could be, like Biosphere 2, that sort of feel to it. And that's going to sort of be the inspiration for a lot of additional sci-fi going forward in sort of a way that ray guns were, a fad for a while in science fiction.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think Tomorrowland's a good reference point. And even just, there's been a lot of TV shows. Fringe had an alternate world, which kind of had some Zeppelins and all these different things. Mm-hmm. Or The Flash had Earth 2, or I can't even follow all the different Earths there. But basically they have some that seem to incorporate more that idea of, it looks more like how you would have envisioned the future from the 1960s and the World's Fairs and all that. So I agree. I think it's a really fun place to play because you have, unlike being in outer space or something more fantastical, it's like kind of goofy takes on things, like having the machine that shoots out the really bad, weird food, or just some of the odd takes that I think we've seen in movies, but it's fun to see put together here, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's sort of all the trappings, like the robots and the automation and all of that things, and then there's also kind of the social experiment that I find so interesting. The city that was going to have temporary residence where you could live there for 18 months or some period of time, and then you were gone, right? Like we're going to have this small population so we can keep a really tight control over it and micromanage every detail, and you were going to come home and there was a new oven in your apartment. So like, what does that do to a society? What does that do to a group of people? Like these are the smart, these are the best, these are the brightest. What happens when you throw them all inside this dome? That to me was more interesting than just the underground tunnels, even though, we have settings in the underground tunnels and highways and things. So, to me, it's all wrapped up in that ball that like there's a level of social control that's going on in this city that Walt had envisioned. How does that play out in reality? And I think that's one of the big questions we're trying to answer in the series.
Well, it raises an interesting question, which I know I've asked people before, but, I know what you're presenting is kind of this alternate universe, but obviously it's not that far alternate, given that it was a plan that Walt was looking to put together in some way. I mean, if he lives another 5-10 years and somehow this gets created, given that it's like this social experiment, does it work? I mean, is it able to work? I mean, how would it change? I don't know. It's a big question. I'm just curious, since that interests you, what do you think might have happened?
Other people can probably guess better than I can. Have you watched the documentary Spaceship Earth?
I have not. No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so it's about Biosphere 2, which I don't know if you're familiar with. And this is really going off on a tangent.
Oh, that's okay. This is good.
Okay, it's sort of related to that 1960s optimistic view of how we're going to rebuild society. So the idea is that it's going to be a completely self-sustained biosphere. And then they had to start pumping in oxygen, and they had some insect problems, and this, that, and the other. And while I'm watching this, I'm saying, like, they start off with this incredibly lofty goal, and they should have, like, continually stopped, reset, started over. Okay, now let's try it. Stop, reset, started over. Instead, they wanted to, like, have this 3-year mission where they're completely enthralled, and it wound up just really kind of failing miserably because they had this idea. So I think the question of would Epcot as a city have worked really boils down to, are they willing to stop, fix the problem, start again? If they're not willing to do that, I don't know how you give me the most genius person. I don't know how you can design something this complex out of the gate.
Yeah, that's a good point. And especially if you think about what actually happened in our reality with things in the 70s, like fuel shortages and the economy and everything. If Epcot gets built and then those types of things happen, they're going to impact that too. And
obviously,
so it kind of raises the same question of, what would happen? Or, Vietnam or whatever, lots of things you could go into. So it really could change it. It's an interesting
or
topic.
Just how are people actually going to respond to coming home and having a new microwave? Like at some point you have to ask that question. Like, are we all going to be good with this? Just we're all good with the fact that people enter our house and replace our stuff. Like that's I'm not sure what kind of level of social cohesion you keep when you have those sort of intrusions on your life. So I think it's definitely an interesting question.
Yeah, no, I'm so curious about season 3, all about people coming back to their houses and what they do when they get new microwaves. No, I don't mean to make light of it. I think it is a really interesting question.
No, I'm using that as an example, but there's a ton of social control that's going on in the original plans for Epcot. Which is also ironic because part of the plan is to show the ability of American industry over the communist system. And we're going to do that by instituting huge levels of social control. So, it's an interesting dichotomy between what they're trying to do and what they have to do it, which is like strip out voting rights from everyone. I mean, that was one of the reasons for the time limit, why they were going to kick people out after a period, because they couldn't have a legal structure without giving people voting rights, and they didn't want to give up control of the city.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of, and I've read books on it and stuff, but I would not claim to be an expert on that part of it, but there's a lot of elements to it that would have been really challenging. And I know things were challenging with Disney World and the Reedy Creek Improvement District, but that's like a minuscule amount compared to what it would have been like if people were living there. I can't even imagine. Okay. Speaking of Disney, there are a lot of references in your show to Disney. And I don't mean like to Disney, the company, but a lot of lines that are spoken are dialogue from pre-shows and various things. I mean, they're done very naturally, but as somebody who knows a lot of these things, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that one. I know that one. And I'm sure I missed plenty of them. So I'm curious too, for you, I know you wanted to get in a lot of these, but how was it like to kind of make it so they would flow naturally, or, what was kind of your goal there? And was it a challenge?
I mean, so they kind of exist on two levels. One, the sort of plot line driven ones. So, if your listeners haven't listened, in season 1, we do a pretty extended riff off Adventures Through Inner Space. That's kind of a big chunk of an episode where we're really kind of riffing off that and doing a sort of parody version, which I think most people are going to mistake for a parody version of Ant-Man, but it is what it is. So there's kind of that level, and then there's ones that are just, I almost call them jokes from me because I'm not sure anyone else is getting them, because there are lines that are really like I have to look it up and double check, and the sort of vague thing I thought about a while ago, but a lot of times it's I've got this character already in mind, or I've got this setting already in mind. How do I kind of plus it, and how do I kind of add that little reference in there. So, they have them meet at a diner. Okay, what's the diner's name? Something with kitchen cabaret. Okay, we'll go with Bonnie's. Bonnie's is the diner's name. Okay, now we need a character named Bonnie. So that's kind of how that develops, and I think it allows the story to feel sort of natural, because the plot element came first, and then the name and the reference is just sort of thrown on top of that. But it also, allows us to just give a little texture for free on top of the world, on top of everything else. I do think people who have no knowledge of Disney can probably enjoy it, but I think if you pick up on a few of those references, all the better for you.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing where it's like you want to put it in there where somebody like could be listening and be like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that. But if they're not going to be like taken out of the story and get angry or something. I don't know how angry we'll get, but you know what I mean. So
they're not going to be confused. It's not going to be something they're going to miss. So
no one's going to go on this long tangent about I don't know, Flight to the Moon and why it was great, or I'm trying to think something that fits the time period or something. But speaking of that too, I recognize some of the voices just through, Ron Schneider, of course, who was in your film, and then John Sakari, Big Fat Panda, I heard in multiple parts. Hal Bowers is like the star from Retro WDW, doing all types of various accents and parts in there, which I really enjoy. So I'm curious for you. You mentioned kind of that like community of people. How did you go about casting the show? There's a lot more people than what I just mentioned, but putting together the group you wanted to have.
Well, season 1 was open casting. So it was us really throwing out the auditions and saying, hey, here are the characters we need. And then, a lot of people, I posted it on actors forums. I posted it on Facebook groups that I'm a part of for, local talent in Florida, local talent in places I've lived and places I have connections. We got a lot of great response. And then I also posted it on my, our Twitter account, and we got some really talented professional actors who don't have the Disney connection. We got a few really talented people who live in Orlando who are, kind of involved in the theme park business. Jacqueline Thomas, who plays Chief Maxian, she works at the Hogwarts show at Universal. So, we have a lot of people who are doing that and kind of professionals on that level. And then we got a lot of people who are, incredibly talented members of the Disney fan community. Everyone except for Ron Schneider, came in with this audition, and, we stuck him through the back door on this one. So
yeah, he had a pretty small role here as like a voices and stuff, but I think it's fun. And I have to mention too, I mentioned Hal Bowers, but there's a song that he's involved with in season 2, I believe, which to me is like the perfect Sherman Brothers EPCOT song. And I'm curious about writing that, how that came together. Like there's a song that's while a character's traveling through to get to a certain point that plays that is just great. So I'm wondering about that song and how that came together.
This was a joke. This was such a conflict because my wife told me I'm spending way too long on this. It's 2 minutes in the show. Why are you wasting your time on this? You could be doing. Yeah. Okay. So I probably put more effort into that song than the entire rest of the episode. But it was a process where I worked with the composer. I wrote the lyrics first. I handed them off to her. She came back with the music and the arrangement and the melody line. I took it. My mom helped me pound out the parts. We put it up on the web and invited, because this was while everyone was stuck at home with the pandemic. So we sent out the call for people to sing in the chorus. I got a bunch of submissions. I edited them all together, made it sound as best I could like this big full chorus. Then Hal Bowers did the vocal on top of that. And, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it, and a whole lot of people. And it was the most complex minute and a half that we've had. But I'm really happy with how it came out. Recording it remotely like we did, I don't think we could have gotten a better result. So.
No, I think it's great. I mean, it stands out just because, you're going along with the story, and I'm just like, and then I'm starting to think, I'm like, they just wrote this just for this and put this in. I mean, not that the rest isn't done just for this, but it was, I was like, some effort. Like, it doesn't surprise me you say that, because like there was some effort put into this.
Should mention that people can find that song as well as our other music on our Bandcamp at prototypeworldoftomorrow.bandcamp.com. So that's all available up there.
Oh, excellent. I think I'll be going to that soon, because I was thinking, I'm like, I would love to just have that song. Like, I don't have to go back to the podcast.
Go check it out. You can listen to it there.
Oh, it's definitely worth it. And who knows, maybe someone will listen and flip around and go back to the show. But speaking of recording, you mentioned earlier trying to record live when you could and bring people together. What was that process like? Because I'll admit, I do a podcast here, but I've never created something as complicated as like an audio series where you're doing sound effects and music and people and everything else. How challenging was that to do?
Well, we're not recording live in the same room, but we're not recording our lines wild individually. We're, as best we can, getting everyone who's in the scene together on the same connection at the same time. And we're using a podcast recording software, and I get everybody's track individually. So I try and go straight through as much as possible and get at least 2 or 3 really good takes and really good performances out of everyone. I'll stop and flood, for flubbed lines and things like that. But the more we can get people in the rhythm of doing that, as if they're doing live theater, as if they're doing, something where they kind of work through the scenes, playing off their partners. I think that's just incredibly valuable for getting the performances out of people. And, we've been lucky that we've pretty much gotten almost all of the actors have been able to make those performances, and we've been able to schedule them out in a way that we can get everybody not together physically, but at least together virtually.
Yeah, and I wondered about that because I was thinking about the 2 leads, Eve and Tim, played by Brian Balance and Kelly Wills. When those 2 are going back and forth, I'm thinking like, there's no way those 2 are recording completely separately all the time, because it just wouldn't have that same chemistry to it.
Yeah, they're always recording together, but what I will say is, like, very frequently it's Brian's 3rd take and then Eve's 1st take and then Brian's 4th take, and then it's so the editing makes it, gives it that little extra something that maybe one take on its own didn't have. But the fact that they were together, the fact that they were playing off each other really gives us fantastic performances.
Oh, I can imagine. So, I mean, how long does it take? You've done 9 episodes now. Like, how much time are you spending editing each one and getting those different takes and putting it together?
Oh, gee. If I'm pushing myself, and I'm doing this in my spare time at this point, so it's a few hours each night when I'm really productive. It'll take me a week and a half of solid work to get an episode edited to the point where I'm sending it off to the mixer. And the mixer who does all the sound effects, I'll mark where the sound effects go, drop in the music cues where they go, and obviously select the cuts and put them in place. And then I send it off to the mixer. He will tighten everything up, add the sound effects, and do the kind of EQ and technical things on that side. So, I'm working on it for each episode for about a week and a half of solid work, not including the recording time. So it does get a little draining when I'm producing 4 or 5 of these a season.
Yeah. I can imagine, just because there's, each one is coming up at, 35 minutes or so, enough where they're not short. So there's a lot to it. So you referenced, early on that you wanted to kind of expand the story. Do you have plans? It sounds like you've got plans, and the way that, I won't give it away, but the way the 2nd season ends, there seems to be more you can cover. So are you going to do a 3rd season?
Oh, absolutely. We've got at least, well, it's open-ended at this point, but we're going to continue with the adventures of Tim and Eve. We've got a Christmas special that I'm working on now, that'll be coming out as kind of standalone. And then, we're hoping January, February, sometime around that time, to drop a full new season. So we're chugging along here. And luckily, I talked to the cast just a little bit on our Slack channel, I think yesterday, and they're all ready and excited to record next. I just have to get writing. So
awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. So I'm curious too, when you're working on something like this, kind of like the film in a way, but you're putting all this time and effort into it, especially season 1, and you put it out there. And so what's it kind of been like to put the show out there and, have it be received, and kind of what you're hearing back on it?
It's great. You don't get that kind of instantaneous feedback that you do in some other medium, but we're really thrilled that people are finding it. We're getting fantastic reviews on iTunes, fantastic reviews on I guess just iTunes. Trying to think where else they leave podcast reviews. I don't know how many of your listeners are also in that sort of creative field, but like when I get a good comment on YouTube, that makes my week. So it is. I'm walking on clouds for the next 72 to however many hours, because just knowing that people are really appreciating what is such a labor of love for me, it just really makes it all worth it.
Oh, yeah. And as someone who does a podcast where, like you mentioned, I mean, I'm not making the same, but where sometimes you put out an episode and you don't hear anything. When you hear something, it's like, okay, you can keep pushing forward.
Yeah,
I'm sure
exactly.
With the amount of time you're spending, that has to be huge. So that's great to hear. And I really like the show. And I think I like how it evolves too, where it starts kind of with his story and kind of starts to grow to something more in the second season beyond a murder mystery. It's pretty complicated. It's cool.
Yeah. And, we've got the podcast opens with the murder of Liam Crawford. And my promise to listeners is we're working towards that. We've got that all's mapped out. That all is ready to go. None of our cast knows it. A few of our crew members know it, but we're working towards this big overarching story that is made up of these smaller little stories. So, stick around, pay attention. You might figure it out.
Yeah, you're not. I'm trying to think of a good example. That people always talk about Lost or or Battlestar or whatever. Which, I mean, granted, I don't mind either of those finales, but you've got a plan, is what you're saying.
Yes, we do have a plan.
All right, great. Well,
I am legitimately always surprised that TV writers don't seem to sometimes. Like I like, didn't you sit down and think this out? Like, I get after season one, like you're setting up your whatever in season one, and that, but like, didn't you think it through after that?
I think it's changed a little bit, but I agree with you. Like, really recently, I've seen shows where I'm like, wow, that all kind of went together. But again, I think it's different because we're out of that network model, because like you have a show that you're like, I want this show to be on for 10 seasons. So you're going to extend it, where now you have these kind of short Netflix kind of model or whatever, where a show might only be on for 3 seasons or 2 seasons. So you have to like pile it on, basically.
Yeah.
And you don't waste your time, I think.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like, my spiritual inspiration, not that the show's anything like this. I watched Gravity Falls, and I watched the second season. I went, wow, that was the most concise 2 seasons, individual stories, but like fully works together. Everything connects. That person knew what they were doing. And then I looked it up, and he's a year younger than me. And I was so pissed off. So...
Yeah, my daughter.
Like, it's okay if the guy's 20 years older than me and can do that, but like a year younger, really?
My daughters would watch that, and then I would see an episode of here and there, and then my wife was like, she went through and watched it on her own and was like, Dan, you don't know this Gravity Falls. I mean, she's like, it's funny, but it's also like really like has a lot of in jokes and the way it goes. It's she raved about it. So I feel like I've seen most of the show, but I haven't seen it in order. I feel like I've seen the finale like 5 times.
And watch it over. In order. Like it's worth it. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Definitely. No, it's a great show, and even individual episodes are really funny. And now I'm going to rein us back in here. This is good. I want to
remind everyone, there's a team of writers on that one. This one's just me. So if the episodes come a little slower, it's just me. So.
Yeah, well, even there, they stopped. They didn't keep doing it season after season, which I think is one reason it was so good. Not that you should stop. I'm not saying that, okay. Ben. But
oh no, just Columbo lasted for 12 years, so I'll be fine.
Yes, you can continue. There's so many examples like that were very good. All right, well, I want to switch gears to the movie briefly because when we talked last on the podcast, you had finished shooting at Walt Disney World. We talked about that. You had not even gotten Ron Schneider to play the head of Walt Disney, so you were kind of about
long ago.
Wow. Yeah, I think it was close. I think it was soon after
you're
that.
You're probably right.
So I want to briefly mention, because I did enjoy it a lot, and I think Ron actually does like a really great job as Walt Disney. And I don't even think, because I'm used to seeing him talk about Dreamfinder and everything, and I watched it. I'm like, if you didn't tell me that was him, I wouldn't know it was Ron. So how did you ultimately decide to cast Ron for that part? Because I feel like that part in your movie, Walt's frozen head, is very important.
Yes, well, being the title character. So I met Ron at a screening of a documentary called The Dark Side of Disney, and it was a good documentary. He was there signing his book. He didn't take Square, so I couldn't purchase it at that moment, which I joke about later. And at that screening, I was I asked, as part of the screening, I got to play the teaser for the movie. And at that point, we hadn't cast Walt. And so from his telling of it, he chuckled at the teaser and kind of went on with his life. And then I met him and I kind of ingested this, and we looked at a few other Walts potentially, and we even reached out to a couple of sort of older retired actors in Hollywood, and worked through a few agents, and nothing was really clicking. It just wasn't something that was gonna happen on that end. And I talked to my producer and I was like, well, what about this guy? He's got this name in this Disney community. At that point, I hadn't seen him in anything except, some clips on YouTube and things like that. So sent him an email and asked if, sent him the script along with it, asked if he'd do the audition. And from his telling of the story, and he can probably tell it better than I did, he just absolutely devoured the script that night. And, got us our audition material back as quickly as possible. And as soon as we saw those clips, we were like, okay, done looking. This is it. This is absolutely it. And so, it was July of that year where we set for 3 or 4 days on a sound stage with him in his Walt makeup and recorded everything we needed. And he was absolutely such a trooper about it. It was, it's weird filming that way because he's sitting in an office chair basically, and we've got a camera on wheels that we're moving around, and we're trying to match our plates as best as possible, and handed it off to our special effects supervisor, and we wound up getting a movie out of it. So that was it. And Ron didn't have anyone to play off of at the time. Like Daniel, who played Peter, stopped in to kind of shake his hand and say hi, but they didn't. I think they wound up meeting for the second time at the premiere we had in Orlando.
That's crazy, because there seem to be a lot of scenes where Ron as Walt is kind of looking at Peter and like, oh boy, you gotta do some things, buddy. And look at this look. And I'm like, he's looking at no one. He's looking at you.
We had the movie edited at that point too. And I think that was really helpful, that we had like layered in temporary audio tracks, and the whole movie was kind of put together, so we knew exactly what we needed when we went in with Ron. Like this shot, this shot, this shot. Okay, well, now we're moving on to the next scene. So it was that level of precision, which really helped.
Totally. So I know nothing about filmmaking. I am not a professional like yourself. How difficult is it to have a film shot and then to put this head into the film when you've shot separately with with effects and everything? How challenging is that?
Well, I can't thank our visual effects supervisor enough, who was graciously working on the project for, as a complete labor of love. And, I frequently would say, hey, David, how's it coming? David, how's it coming? So, he was doing the bulk of the work himself. I have things I would do differently next time, including maybe some tracking markers and things like that. But, for the most part, I was shocked with what he was able to do with just raw footage. Like, we didn't have technical whatever. It was just him working with the footage, tracking, matting, and then that sort of thing. We did limit our moving shots as best as possible, but there obviously are a few, because I knew in order to sell Walt's frozen head, we had to have this scene where we walked with Peter in this long tracking shot where he's holding a head. So we do it a couple times, and I knew that was kind of an integral effect for the film. But a lot of times I was looking at 1960s movies, especially special effects ones like Absent-Minded Professor. Like, a lot of times the images you remember from there, they happen once or twice in the movie. That car only flies once or twice, and you kind of get everything you need to out of those. So we knew where we were using our visual effects, and we tried to use them well.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be like you said, it's not every shot, but like Walt's presence is there even when he's, still in the basement or wherever on the laundry room or whatever he's sitting.
Even when the doors close and he's being walked around with the
right. With the back of the thing. Yeah, I think of like the effects like that. The one I always think about, like, I don't know if it's Absent-Minded Professor or one of the sequel where they have the basketball players and they like get it on their shoes and then they keep dunking the basketball. And it's like the simplest effect where it's basically the camera just pulls up and you see the guys like dunking. And I just think, like you mentioned with the 60s, it doesn't always require, it can be simple if it works.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. I've been meaning to bring that up for 100 plus episodes, and now I've finally done it. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Okay. So one other thing I would ask about, too, is I had not seen the full movie, of course, when we talked before. And we did talk about shooting at Disney World and such. But I'm curious, too. There's a few shots where you have, like, a Molly get on the Haunted Mansion or Peter on the People Mover. Like when you have like a live shot where someone's actually, they're not just walking through the park, they're actually getting on a ride. Like, how much more complicated is that, or what was that like?
I mean, we really scoped out everything in pretty good detail before we went to shoot. And invariably what happened is me and one of the other producers and the cinematographer would go and we would say, okay, we've got this scene. Molly and Peter kind of have this little argument, right? Okay, where's the best place to shoot this? We look over here, we look around for security guards, and then invariably we choose from every other perspective the absolute worst, but like it looks really pretty and it's great and we can set the camera up here and like but there's security guards walking by every 5 minutes. So invariably we always chose those. The tangled bathrooms, which were remarkably hard to shoot at, and we kind of came back 3 times in order to stitch that scene together. A lot of it is we knew what we were getting and we knew when we'd gotten it, and so we didn't need. There are 3 safety takes that you usually get when you're shooting something like that. Like when we get a good one of, Kate hopping on the People Mover, or not the People Mover, the Haunted Mansion. Okay, we're done. We move on, and then that's kind of what we did for that whole shoot. It was a lot of reviewing footage, making sure we got it, and then moving on in a way that I think normally my instinct is, okay, let's just get one more, just one more. It'll be fine. We'll get a slightly different performance or something like that. But no, we came out with the footage we needed, and that's what we got.
Well, excellent. Well, I wanted to ask kind of a general question because it kind of relates to you doing your podcast about Progress City is, the movie, I feel like, there is nostalgia. You have Walt in there. He's trying to stay in charge. There's some like nostalgia for the past, but then also kind of, I feel like a lot of the point of the movie is, he's got to move forward and Peter's got to move forward and everything. So how does this connect? Because, I think about Progress City and EPCOT and a lot of fans and how we're really like, oh, those were so great. And now, or they didn't happen or whatever. Should we read this movie as being like, we all need to move forward and not be as concerned looking back? Or am I getting too deep here, Ben?
Are we talking about Walt's Frozen Head? Or are we talking about Prototype World of Tomorrow? I mean, that's the... Or are you talking about my oeuvre?
I think Walt's Frozen Head, but I think it connects to Prototype City of Tomorrow.
Fair. Walt's Frozen Head is focused on the Magic Kingdom for a reason. It's this nostalgic place for Walt. It's this, so I think if we ever made a sequel, it would be about the future in a different way. So I don't know I don't know how it connects with this idea of EPCOT as something bigger, because I want to be the person who says we need to move on. The dream is not just everything, but like on the other hand, like EPCOT was something. Like EPCOT was something, guys. And if you didn't see it, you have no idea. Like it was something we don't have anymore. And that really is truly lost in a real way. It is a tragedy that I will never be able to take my kids on journey into imagination. And, I don't have I'm contradicting my own message, I guess. Like I don't have a better explanation than that, but like it legitimately makes me sad when I think about the fact that I won't be able to take my kids to a place that inspires them like it inspired a 5-year-old me when I sat down and met Dreamfinder and Figment. That my kids might have an analogy for that, but I can't give them that. Like, gee. So sorry to bring the tone down.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I think it gets at, things that I think about, because I think, you don't want to just keep saying, wow, wasn't X great then? But in another way, you want to be like, that was great.
I mean, we're not talking about the wubbulous world of Sid and Mary Croft here. We're talking about something that like had meat and had meaning. And when we were planning a trip to Florida, I sat my 5-year-old down in front of the TV and showed him the Danny Kaye. My 5-year-old now showed him the Danny Kaye special, and then halfway through he said, "Are we gonna see all of this?" And I was like, "Oh, kid, I'm so sorry. I'm just ruining your life." So,
it's better they don't know. No,
it's better. I guess it might be. You know what? It might be. So.
Okay. Well, last question of Walt's Frozen Head.
He loved the Danny Kaye special, by the way. I'm just telling you.
I don't mean to brush by the Danny Kaye special. I mean, that's fun. Those some of those old specials are great. My girls find those. I don't know if you watched that one, but some of the old ones they just find entertaining because some of them are really weird, and I mean that in the best way possible. All right. So last question, Walt's Frozen Head. You mentioned a sequel. Would you go back when you feel like you're able to do another film and do another Walt's Frozen Head movie?
Oh, gosh. I mean, first of all, would it even be feasible? I have no idea. So, we were in there in a very narrow period of time, different security concerns, different everything. So I don't even know if that'd be feasible. What would the story be? It'd be something different. It would, and then do we have a fan base for it? It's, we're very happy with the response we got to it. I still, every once in a while, it goes back to what I said before. Sometimes I'll get a YouTube comment on that video that makes my week. Like somebody just last week told me like, "Oh, your movie made me cry." And I was like, "Oh, gee, like that. I'm so happy about that." Now, that being said, there's still a lot of red ink on that movie's budget line. So, it would have to be a very different situation. So if someone wants to come in with a large check and sponsor something like that, we'll talk.
Well, Disney, they're doing good, right? They're on top of it. They can do
what?
this.
Bob Iger, I can create you the world's cheapest Disney Plus content. You know what? It was expensive for me to produce it. We raised money on Kickstarter, but it'll be cheap for you. So
much cheaper than that Obi-Wan Kenobi show, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's about 5 seconds of The Mandalorian. So
yes, it's cheaper than the one shot of the ship taking off. All right. Well, Ben, I want to finish with just some random questions. I'm going to apologize for these in advance because they're pretty stupid, but I feel like we should end on a fun note. And they all connect to either EPCOT or Progress City. Are you ready for this?
I'm absolutely ready.
Okay. So looking at Progress City, which of these parts of the Progress City idea that originally came together are you saddest that we didn't see? So there are 3 options.
Okay.
1 is the airport. 2 is the tall Cosmopolitan Hotel. And 3 is the roller rink. Which makes you saddest?
Oh, the Cosmopolitan Hotel. Like that's the centerpiece of this kind of domed city. I think that's the icon of it. So the roller rink. I can do without a roller rink.
I think I just wrote that just so I could laugh about the roller rink. But that was the question. Yeah, I agree. That is the correct answer. Okay, second one in your show prototype World Tomorrow. Who gives a better over-the-top performance? Of these 2, John Sicari as Bonnie or Hal Bowers as the sandwich guy?
The sandwich guy.
The guy, I don't remember his name, the guy who sells the sandwiches, who's like the shop owner who wants to give him like a sandwich or something. With the Hal Bowers with the ridiculous accent.
Luge. Oh, Luge. No, he's not giving him a sandwich. He's giving him. Oh, okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Luge. I think you got to give that to Bonnie for over the top performance. Like, him coming in with that, Tim, how are you voice. Just, I think you got to give it to the edge to John. So,
yeah, I think so. That was great. John, he's got another career he can do here, I think. So
absolutely.
Okay. So which of these characters from Horizons has the worst habit? The beach boy, because he's always late. The grandfather who's always correcting seaweed to kelp. Mm-hmm. Or the boy who keeps losing his teddy bear in space. Who is the worst?
I feel like the teddy bear in space is the one that could actually kill someone, so I would go with that one. Like, you float away from the ship, your tether gets severed, suddenly you're, out in the void of space. So I would say that's the worst.
It's good that we didn't see the rest of that scene. It could be a problem.
Yeah,
That's what you're saying.
It's going to end poorly.
Okay, speaking of Horizons, let's say you're in charge of Disney and you could bring back Horizons. You could bring it back.
Okay.
But you'd have to replace one of these to do it. Which would you choose? Or would you say none? But
okay.
Would you get rid of the Land Pavilion, Space Mountain, or Spaceship Earth? You have to remove one of those to put in Horizons.
I would. I'm keeping the land. I'll take Space Mountain out. No, there's one in Disneyland. I'm taking out the Walt Disney World version. We have the worst version of it too at Disney World. So
yeah, no onboard audio. It kind of hurts, The
whole thing needs to be. Yeah, I'll take that out. Now I'm not even crying about it. And you got Tron now too. Why do you need a second indoor? Good to get rid of it.
Put Horizons there next to Tron. Totally works, right?
Yeah.
Okay, final question, which I think I know the answer to based on what you said a few minutes ago. Setting aside Horizons, what is the other EPCOT Center pavilion that you enjoyed the most when you were younger?
Oh, Imagination. There's not even a question. World of Motion is the second runner-up. I'll tell you, I don't even have I know I must have ridden Horizons. I have no memory of that. I have strong memories at 5 of Journey into Imagination. I have incredibly strong memories of World of Motion, Spaceship Earth. So, but yeah, it's Imagination all the way.
Yeah, and I think, too, you mentioned you were 5. I don't think Horizons really hits as much when you're 5. Like, to me, I think I became more of a fan going, when I was, 12, 13, whatever. Whereas when you're like 8, you see Figment or World of Motion has all kinds of weird gags. That kind of hits more, I think, when you're that age, I think.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the thing I remember most about World of Motion was the Bird and Robot show, which apparently no one else remembers but me. So, but I have very vivid memories of this. So.
Yeah, that post-show area had 5 more things. It was
crazy.
It
was great. It was fantastic. It
was
right. On par with Communicore.
Yeah, there was a ton to do. There was another thing where you walked into a room, I don't remember the name, and the water engine one, you look up and there's all these circles with all these people trying to make this different engine. And it's really inventive for one of a bunch of post-show areas.
Oh, yeah. And there was the orchestra that was made up of car parts. So it's great.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Well, thank you for humoring me with those questions.
Absolutely.
We don't want to get too down on what we don't have with EPCOT, so instead we can just ask questions about ridiculous accents to make up for it. Okay. Well, Ben, this has been great. I'm curious too, are there any other projects that you're working on beyond just continuing to do Prototype World of Tomorrow?
At this point, I am all in on this project. We'll see how long we can go. We'll see how far it can last. But I'm excited about this one. We keep growing our fan base. We keep growing our listeners. So we are just thrilled with where it is. And as long as it keeps growing and as long as people find it and enjoy it, we're going to keep making it.
I'm sure many listeners have already heard it, and it's great. But if people haven't and want to check out your podcast or even Walt's Frozen Head, where should they go?
worldoftomorrowseries.com will give you all the links you need to subscribe, or you can just search Prototype World of Tomorrow on your podcast app of choice. We're also on YouTube. People tend to not listen to it there, but hey, if you're one of those people who does podcasting on YouTube, you can search for that. And Walt's Frozen Head is still up on YouTube if you do want to watch it some evening. So it is up there, and that one's up there, and also the director's commentary, if that's something you're interested in. Just hear me talk and reminisce about it for an hour and a half.
Well, excellent. Yeah, I still want to check out the commentary. It looks really fun, just especially given that you shot at Disney World and some of the stories from there. I think it would be really cool. Well, Ben, thank you so much. This is the longest stretch between 2 episodes anyone's had, almost 5 years later. I hope we talk again on the show before 2025, but thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this show, I have interviewed quite a few filmmakers, including Leslie Iwerks about the Imagineering story, producer John Walker about Tomorrowland, and Philip B. Swift early on about the dark side of Disney. You can find those and a lot more at tomorrowsociety.com/podcast with an S at the end. Don't forget to submit your questions for the upcoming listener Q&A show. I'm going to set the deadline at November 1st, which is next Sunday. Send your thoughts on anything you'd like to hear me talk about that's happening now, history, news about Disney, whatever you'd like to hear. You can email me, dan@tomorrowsociety.com, or send me a message on Twitter, TomorrowSOC, Facebook or Instagram @TomorrowSociety. If you'd like to help out this listener-supported show, you can go to tomorrowsociety.com/member and leave a small contribution through Patreon. Receive access to some really cool perks and make a big difference in keeping this show moving forward. The Tomorrow Society podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Dan Heaton. The music was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I'll be talking again with Rick Harper, the director of Impressions to France. We dig further into that attraction, and we also talk about a lot of his experiences working with Disney legends like John Hench, Harper Goff, so many others. It was a super fun conversation and great to catch up with Rick once again. Thanks so much for listening. Be safe out there. Wear your masks. Have a great Halloween. I'll talk to you again very soon.